Hello there, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. And did the creators of the Acolyte break Star Wars lore for like the 20th time in one season? I mean, they're making up magical helmets and wrist guards and stuff that can turn off lightsabers. When I see stuff like that on the internet, it just makes me angry because I'm really trying to walk a thin line here. I usually don't get disengaged in all the drama stuff. In all honesty, I'm more of a Rogue One Andor guy. I like war drama, politics. I'm really not that big of a fan of the Jedi or the Sith, if you guys haven't noticed my coverage. But the Acolyte has been getting bashed so heavily, I feel the need to defend it. And not from the people who have, like, the constructive criticism. A lot of you guys who are still watching, who say they hate the show, I get what you're saying, like, when it comes to clunkiness of the dialogue, the pacing in certain places, but again, guys, 13% on Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, it should get at least 50%. I mean, it is so ridiculous how over the top all this has been. But anyway, guys, at the end of the day, you as viewers control the algorithm. It's not the creators who control the algorithm. When you guys click on those rage bait YouTube channels, and you can tell when they're rage baiting because if you scroll down on all the videos they're doing, it's all just negativity. You know, there are good channels, big channels out there that do constructive criticism that might be very negative towards Star Wars, but they at least know what they're talking about and they're finding reasonable points. I'm not talking about those channels. I'm talking about all the grifters. When you click on that kind of content, the algorithm thinks that content is what you want. And, you know, at the end of the day, us content creators, most of us have to do what the algorithm tells us. Most of us. I have a big enough channel, thankfully, that I can, like, survive doing stuff that people hate, but, you know, it is what it is, bro. But yeah, let's talk about Cortosis, shall we? That's the magical material that's shorting out everyone's lightsabers. This is kind of like deep Star Wars lore. If you haven't read the Star Wars Expanded Universe books and Legends, and if you haven't read some of the more recent canon books. But yeah, Cortosis joins a list of awesome Legends material that's been turned canon in the last decade or so. You had Beskar in The Mandalorian, which was a must-have because that metal is not only extremely robust, it's also a part of the Mandalorian's religion. You know, we had Frick also, which is very durable and a rare metal that could block lightsabers. That was reintroduced, I think, in the prequels with the Magna Guard droids. And now completing the holy trinity of metals you want to have on your side when you're fighting a Jedi or a Sith is Cortosis. So Cortosis is a relatively brittle metal when compared to Beskar and Frick. Well, actually, both of those alloys, both Beskar and Frick, take a lot of work to be turned into something that's kind of usable. We tend to always think, oh, hey, magical metal that can deflect everything. Simple. But there's actually a lot of science and metallurgy that goes into the process of making stuff like Beskar ingots. For instance, Mando Smiths require something known as a cryo furnace, which is just not your usual type of forge. And if you haven't noticed, all Mandalorian armor smiths are highly trained in combat. Not because it's fun to dual major in hammer combat and Beskar forging, like some overachieving Asian family friend that my mom always compares me to. It's because Mandalorian armor smiths, at least in Legends, would rather die or were forced to rather die than give up the secrets of forging a workable Beskar armor. This was a very important cultural secret, and yeah, these armor smiths defended it with their lives. This is probably also why armor smiths tended to lead societies. Anyway, Cortosis is an extremely rare material, and it's stupid difficult to work with. It was only found in tiny quantities. You basically had to mine a ton of other less important materials to just get trace amounts of it. And at least in Legends, pure Cortosis in very small trace amounts could kill most living beings, even like Hutts. And so you had to, like, refine this stuff in a very thorough process. I mean, you think spice mining was bad, but Cortosis miners have to have fully pressurized suits. Otherwise, those particles would accumulate in their bodies and they would start losing their hair and eventually die. Like that reactor team on the Widowmaker. You know, lead suits my ass. And because Cortosis is extremely energy resistant, you couldn't just use standard equipment like plasma torches to, you know, cut it out. You needed a good old-fashioned hydraulic drill or some type of blunt force type of tool. To find these deposits, you usually had to look for large lethane deposits. Lethane, I'm guessing, is more combustible than methane, more lethal. Huh? And so, yeah, this stuff is just not easy to get out of the ground. There are many ways you can die trying to get it out of the ground. In general, being a miner in Star Wars with the lack of regulations and labor rights in the galaxy meant it was a terrible job. I mean, Darth Bane's father was a miner, and he basically beat the darkside into that boy, taking out all of his frustrations in the mine on him. But yeah, in real life, like miners, that's a really thankless and tough job. And honestly, without miners, most of the stuff we see around us would not exist. I mean, they really do keep the world running. So keep them in your thoughts when you're doing anything. Anyway, so far there are only 2 deposits of Cortosis in canon that have been found. One is on Dinzo, a mid-rim territory where the Empire had a secret mine. And then there's a second location on Mukovich, which is even older, and that was basically found by the Separatist Alliance during the Clone Wars. Actually, Count Dooku received secret information from the Grisk race about this deposit. If you guys like the new Thrawn novels, they're basically kind of like the Yuzang Vong Light. I mean, actually, the only similarity is that they pose a threat to both the Chiss and the Empire. And they also like to mess around with the galaxy from behind the scenes, like a Sith Lord or the Praetorian Vong. You're supposed to say Yuzang Vong? Isn't like just Vong offensive? The Grisk most likely exposed this source of Cortosis to the Separatists to shift the balance of the Clone Wars toward the CIS's favor. Classic divide and conquer move. Kind of like the Culture Wars. Like seriously, Culture Wars and Star Wars? You'd think there'd be more important things to fight about. Anyway, the whole plan was for the Separatists to mine this material, process it into almost a wire that was then just woven into a thin mesh. This would then be laid into the armor of a BT Super Battle Droid, and this one just short out Jedi lightsabers. Remember, blasters are also energy weapons, and they would basically be unable to pierce this type of armor. It would probably also confuse the crap out of clone troopers, although eventually I think if you use a kinetic energy weapon like the mass drivers on the ATTEs, it would do damage. Them clone boys love their fire support. Anyway, that whole operation would be destroyed during the Clone Wars. Actually, Thrawn would come together with Anakin and Padme Amidala, and they would destroy the facility. It's a classic the main characters are everywhere moment, although establishing the relationship between Thrawn and Anakin leads to some interesting moments later on during the Imperial period in the other Thrawn trilogy. Also, because this Cortosis operation was being run by Count Dooku, aka Darth Tyrannus, then, Darth Sidious knew about it as well, and eventually he would also open his own mine, which was the Dinzo mine. But by that time, Order 66 would have already happened, and the Cortosis would have been much more useful against the Sith Inquisitors and maybe even Palpatine himself than the Jedi who were all in hiding. But, Palpatine always hated dueling with lightsabers. He thought it was beneath him, so, the idea of having Cortosis around might be a good idea for him. The TAG Corporation, that TAG, did eventually use Cortosis to produce the TAG Protoblade, which was like a plasma blade that was fit into a gauntlet. It's supposed to be a replacement for the lightsaber. But the Cortosis was actually used to create a containment field, which is kind of a stupid design. But then again, maybe Palpatine didn't want people to know what this Cortosis was actually capable of. If they made it into a shield or a sword, then they would have known. Now, one of the villains of Hera Syndulla and Canis Jaros' story is Count Denatris Vidian. He actually had a Cortosis mesh skin graft installed into his body. It was purified, of course, and he was able to actually absorb a blaster round and then dispel that energy, stunning another person near him. It's pretty cool. And not only can Cortosis be woven into armor, Chimera over here has it in a gauntlet and on a helmet, and he clearly knows how to use these offensive, defensive tools. I mean, look at how he reaches out with his wrist right here to take out Jedi Number 1's blade, and then he headbutts the other blade. I mean, you really gotta trust your headgear to do this kind of stuff. Kind of reminds me of when we used to break in our football helmets and we'd smash it against the walls. This is probably why I mispronounce a lot of things in Star Wars, probably. I love how the Jedi are completely caught off guard by this Cortosis material. I mean, I imagine if anyone knows what this stuff is going to be, it's going to be Jecki, rest in peace, who seems like the kind of nerdy girl who would go through the archives and learn about the ancient materials there, I love Yord's move with the Cortosis helmet. He kind of figures out what this material does, but I feel like he didn't think his plan through. He also just isn't as ruthless as the Sith Lord. He wasn't ready. Rest in peace. We also see Dr. Chelilona Afra using the Null Blade, an ancient blade made out of Cortosis against Darth Vader during the battle at Amaxine Station. Vader has a really bad history with this material. In Legends, as Darth Vader was slowly relearning how to be a badass, he was actually lured into a trap on Kessel by several Jedi, and one of them had a Cortosis blade, and they almost got him. But then they forgot he could break people's necks with the Force. Which is really the point here. Cortosis is kind of a trick, and Chimera uses it to his fullest advantage in order to murk as many Jedi as possible, as early as possible in this battle. And this allowed him to deal with the more competent fighters, like in a one-on-one situation. But once you know how Cortosis works, you can actually kind of game plan your way around it. But yeah, anyway, I think it's really awesome that Cortosis has become canon again. I think this is a really cool material that allows the writers to do some really creative things with the story. And honestly, in Legends, it was just everywhere. Quinlan Vos had a Vambrace. I remember the Yunchuri, who were kind of like Darth Plagueis' first attempt to kill the Jedi. They would wield these Cortosis shields while attacking the Jedi Temple, and they managed to kill a few Jedi as well. So, it is effective. There's even an entire faction known as the Imperial Knights, and they had Cortosis gauntlets. There was also the Riot Stormtroopers from Force Unleashed 2. They had electrostaffs with that material. And Cad Bane even had Cortosis slugs for his slug thrower, and yeah, he could just shoot it at a Jedi. They would try to block it, and the lightsaber would go off. It's actually brilliant. But yeah, I've been waiting for Cortosis to come to live action for quite a long time. I really like the effect that they create when blades hit it, and I think it works very well. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our coverage. We'll be talking more about that very intense battle in the Acolyte Episode 5 in our next episode, so stay tuned.